Welcome everyone to Vpod.ai. I'm your host Mike, and I'm joined by our guest Susan. You can sponsor this podcast for just $25. Your message will be featured across major platforms like Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, and more. If you're interested, visit Vpod.ai to get started today.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure to be here.
So when you book a ticket on a high-end luxury cruise ship, you are really buying into a very specific kind of fantasy.
Oh, absolutely. You're looking for that total escape.
Right, exactly. You imagine yourself setting sail from a port like Ushuaia, Argentina, and heading out into the pristine, freezing, and incredibly remote waters of the South Atlantic.
Yeah, you picture the breathtaking ice-scapes and, the elegant dinners.
Totally. A total, absolute escape from the chaos of the world.
Yeah.
But for the passengers aboard the MV Andius, that dream vacation quietly, almost imperceptibly at first, turned into a floating medical emergency.
It really is the ultimate locked room scenario. I mean, you are in one of the most isolated environments on the planet.
Surrounded by an ocean that just stretches for thousands of miles.
Right. And then something unseen begins moving through the corridors. The psychological shift from a luxury vacation to a survival situation is profound, especially when you consider that a ship at sea is a closed-loop system.
Meaning everything is shared, right?
Exactly. The air, the food, the space, it is all shared.
Okay, let's unpack this, because our mission today is to trace the harrowing timeline of this specific vessel.
It's a really crucial timeline to understand.
It is. We're going to explore how a uniquely rare, deadly pathogen managed to slip right through the cracks of standard maritime health protocols.
And we will look at exactly why health officials across multiple continents are now scrambling.
Yeah, and the way this all started is just chillingly ordinary.
The timeline is the key here. It helps us understand how a localized tragedy on a ship mutated into a global tracking nightmare. It all begins on April 1st.
Right, the passengers board in Argentina, heading for the South Atlantic.
And for the first 10 days, it is exactly what you would expect. People are mingling, they're eating at buffets, watching presentations.
And we actually have a really unique window into those first 10 days. One of the passengers who boarded was a Turkish travel vlogger named Rui Senet.
Oh, wow. So he was documenting everything.
Exactly. He got on the ship intending to film a story about a remote South Atlantic archipelago. He's walking around capturing the luxury cruising experience. But then, on April 11th, a Dutch man passes away on board.
Now, a sudden death on a cruise ship is tragic, obviously, but we have to understand the context of the cruise industry here.
It's not entirely unprecedented, right?
No, not at all. Luxury expedition cruises often attract a demographic of retirees and, senior citizens.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So people do pass away from natural causes, heart attacks, strokes while at sea. Every large cruise ship actually has a morgue for this exact reason.
Wait, really? A morgue?
Yeah, it's standard protocol. But what happens next is where those established protocols start to collide with human psychology in a very dangerous way.
Because the very next day, April 12th, the captain makes a ship-wide announcement over the intercom.
Right, and that's not something that happens every day.
No. And Sine, our vlogger, noted that he immediately felt something was off. The captain hadn't been doing daily briefings before this.
So that sudden voice echoing through the cabins must have felt really heavy.
Exactly. Sinead actually pulled out his camera and recorded the announcement. And the captain's exact words to the passengers were that the death was, quote, due to natural causes.
Okay.
He specifically stated that whatever health issues the passenger had were not infectious, and therefore the ship is safe.
What's fascinating here is the sheer tension between managing a closed environment and the absolute danger of making definitive medical assumptions too quickly.
Because they didn't really know for sure yet.
Exactly. On a ship, panic is a severe operational hazard. A captain's primary instinct, drilled into them through years of training, is to maintain order.
Right. Keep everyone calm.
Yeah, if you announce a mysterious infectious disease in the middle of the ocean, you risk a stampede. You risk passengers hoarding supplies or locking themselves away.
Or demanding immediate evacuation from a location where evacuation is physically impossible.
Precisely.
But declaring a mystery illness definitively non-infectious mere hours after a death. I mean, that feels like an astonishing leap of faith.
It's definitely a bold claim.
It's an illusion of safety. It's like a building manager telling you over the loudspeaker that the fire alarm is just a routine drill, but you are standing in the hallway and you can clearly smell smoke.
That's a great analogy.
How could anyone offer such absolute certainty without a full autopsy?
Well, they can't. But the power of authority is immense. When the person navigating the ship, the ultimate authority figure in that environment, tells you that you are safe, the human brain desperately wants to believe it.
We just crave normalcy.
Exactly. So the passengers naturally just resume their routines.
They completely resumed them. For 12 straight days after that announcement, there were 0 isolation protocols implemented.
Wow. 12 days.
Yeah, people were crowding into the dining halls, going to entertainment shows, just sitting shoulder to shoulder in the lounges.
Which is the worst thing you can do if there's a pathogen.
Totally. Though to his credit, Sinnott took his own precautions. He felt a disconnect with the mostly older passenger base anyway, so he started isolating himself.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, he ate his meals alone in his cabin. That antisocial impulse, or maybe just his gut intuition that the vibes were off, might have literally physically saved his life.
It highlights a critical vulnerability in these environments. When official channels declare safety, the only defense left to you is your own individual intuition.
Right, your gut feeling.
Yeah, if you override your gut feeling because the man in the uniform said it was fine, you are entirely at the mercy of their assessment.
And as we see over the next few weeks, the consequences of the captain's premature assessment were about to spill over the steel boundaries of the ship.
They absolutely were.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because on April 24th, almost 2 full weeks after the first death, the ship makes a scheduled stop at the incredibly remote island of St. Helena.
And this is where things shift from a local issue to a global one.
Yes, this is where they take the body of the first victim off the vessel. But they didn't just offload the tragedy. Because they believed the natural causes narrative, they offloaded the risk.
Right.
Dozens of living, breathing passengers disembarked right there to end their trip and fly home.
This is the critical juncture of the entire story. A cruise ship is essentially a floating quarantine facility if it's managed correctly. It has limited entry and exit points.
But the moment you open those doors...
Exactly. The moment you let people off that ship and into an international transit hub, you are breaking containment.
Breaking the containment without a single shred of contact tracing.
Which is just staggering.
The cruise company, Oceanwide Expeditions, says 29 people left. The Dutch Foreign Ministry estimates it was actually closer to 40 people.
That's a significant difference.
It is. And these passengers represented at least 12 different nationalities. They just walked off the ship, headed to the local airport, and scattered to the wind on commercial flights.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you are looking at a massive jurisdictional void. This is where bureaucratic mechanisms fail us.
How so?
Well, a ship is governed by maritime law and its flag state. Once it docks at St. Helena, it interacts with local island health authorities. But St. Helena is a tiny overseas territory with limited medical infrastructure.
Right. They can't handle a massive outbreak.
Exactly. They don't have the capacity to mass test a cruise ship for unknown pathogens. So maritime law essentially hands the baton to local authorities, who then immediately hand the baton to international aviation authorities as these people board flights.
It's like a relay race where everyone assumes the previous runner checked the safety protocols.
That is exactly what it is.
It is terrifying when you break it down like that. We have to ask, if a passenger just died of an unknown cause, how on earth could international health officials allow the victim's own spouse to just hop on a commercial flight?
It's a huge oversight.
Because the first victim's wife did exactly that. She left the ship at St. Helena. She got on a flight on April 25th to South Africa.
Oh my goodness.
And Sine, the vlogger, was sitting right there on that exact same flight. And tragically, the victim's wife later died in South Africa.
The epidemiological implications of that single flight are staggering. The authorities in Europe and South Africa are now facing a logistical nightmare of epic proportions.
Trying to track everyone down.
Yeah, they're trying to track down these 40 passengers weeks after they dispersed. Take the Swiss man who also disembarked at St. Helena.
Right, the one who tested positive later.
Exactly. He flew all the way home to Switzerland and subsequently tested positive for the virus. Think about the mechanics of his journey.
It's wild to picture.
He gets off the ship, waits in an airport lounge in St. Helena, boards a plane, likely transits through a major international hub in Europe, uses the public restrooms, buys a coffee from a vendor, breathes the recycled air on a second flight, and finally takes a train or a cab to his house.
He interacted with hundreds, maybe thousands of people before he even knew he was sick.
It's a virologist's worst nightmare.
Which begs the question, what exactly is this invisible monster they're dealing with? Because for weeks, no one knew.
No one had a clue.
It wasn't until May 2nd, that the first confirmed case was officially identified. A British man had to be medically evacuated from Ascension Island, which was the ship's next stop after St. Helena.
And that's when they finally got an answer.
Yes, his blood tests finally gave this nightmare a name, Hantavirus.
That diagnosis alone is highly unusual and incredibly confusing for a ship's medical staff.
Why is that?
Well, when medical professionals hear hantavirus, they typically think of a very specific environmental exposure. The mechanism of infection for standard hantavirus is almost exclusively inhalation of aerosolized, contaminated rodent droppings.
So it's not something you catch from another person.
Right, it's an environmental hazard. You see it in people who have been sweeping out an abandoned barn or opening up a dusty cabin that has been closed all winter. Crucially, standard hantaviruses do not spread from person to person.
But this wasn't a standard strain. Tests confirmed this was the Andes virus.
And that changes everything.
Yeah, it's a specific South American strain of hantavirus. And it is the only hantavirus known to science that has developed the ability to spread from human to human.
That changes the entire calculus of the threat. The Andes virus causes hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, and the way it attacks the body is just brutal.
What does it do?
It triggers a massive immune response that causes the capillaries in the lungs to leak. The lungs essentially fill with fluid.
Oh, wow.
It mimics severe pneumonia or acute heart failure initially, which explains why a doctor might look at an elderly patient in respiratory distress and assume a natural, non-infectious cardiac event.
That makes total sense.
But it is incredibly painful, fast-acting once those symptoms peak, and frequently fatal.
And the geographic breadcrumbs were there. The Dutch couple, the first ones to get sick, had been traveling around South America before they boarded the ship.
Which is a huge clue.
The ship itself departed from Ushuaia, Argentina. Argentina is a known geographical hotspot for this specific, deadly human-to-human strain.
Right.
In fact, Argentina had 28 hantavirus deaths the previous year, carrying a staggering 30% mortality rate.
Those are terrifying numbers.
So I have to wonder, if you are the chief medical officer on a ship departing from Argentina, shouldn't a South American respiratory virus be on your radar the moment a passenger drops dead from acute respiratory failure?
This raises an important question about cognitive bias in medicine. We tend to judge these situations with the benefit of hindsight, but we have to look at the psychology of the environment.
You mean the luxury setting?
Exactly. The rarity of a pathogen can completely blindside even highly trained medical professionals because of the visual cues of their surroundings.
That makes sense.
If you are a ship's doctor, your brain is primed to look for norovirus, food poisoning, or influenza. You are looking at a patient in a pristine, climate-controlled luxury cabin with room service.
So it just doesn't compute.
The environment tells your brain, safe, sterile, wealthy. You are not primed to look for a hyper-rare 30% fatality rate agricultural pathogen associated with rural rodent infestations.
It's a tragic blind spot. The luxury of the ship literally masked the reality of the virus.
Precisely. That initial misdiagnosis attributing the first death to non-infectious natural causes is what allowed the Andes virus to quietly replicate and spread among the passengers.
Because they weren't taking precautions.
Right. On a ship, you have closed-loop HVAC systems circulating air, you have narrow corridors where people brush past each other, you have shared dining utensils. It is the perfect incubator for a pathogen that relies on close-quarter transmission.
And that incubator has led to an absolutely grim current reality. Let's look at where the ship is right now.
It's not a good situation.
The toll is devastating. 3 people are confirmed dead, 5 are confirmed infected. Several others are sick and symptomatic, just waiting for test results.
It's heartbreaking.
The third fatality was a German woman who passed away on May 2nd. And because of the sheer logistics of where they are in the ocean, her body is still on board the vessel.
Try to imagine the psychological toll on the remaining passengers and crew.
I can't even fathom it.
You are trapped on a steel island. You know there is a lethal pathogen circulating in the air you are breathing, and you have the physical, undeniable reminder of its lethality still on board with you. The anxiety must be suffocating.
And it continues to escalate. Just recently, while the ship was navigating near the West African island country of Cape Verde, 3 more people had to be emergency evacuated to Europe for intensive treatment.
And there's a really critical detail there.
Yeah, importantly, one of those 3 people was the ship's own doctor.
When the medical infrastructure of a closed system collapses, the crisis multiplies exponentially.
Because there's no one left to help.
The doctor is the anchor in that environment. They're the one person trained to manage the symptoms and maintain medical order. When the authority figure themselves falls critically ill, the remaining illusion of control just shatters.
Right now, the MV Andius is carrying about 150 passengers and crew, and it is limping towards Spain's Canary Islands.
That's a journey of several days.
Several days of waking up, looking at your cabin mate, and waiting to see who spikes a fever next. Now, Ocean-Wide Expeditions, the company operating the ship, has obviously come out to defend their early actions.
Which is expected in a situation like this.
And we have to look at this fairly. They stated that at the time of the first death, the actual cause was completely unknown.
True.
They pointed out that no one else was showing symptoms at that exact moment, and they insist they followed all proper maritime reporting standards for a death at sea.
Okay, so they stuck to the manual.
So what does this all mean? Because on one hand, you have corporations saying, hey, we checked all the legal boxes, we did what the manual said. And on the other hand, you have passengers stating bluntly that they were not well informed and were placed in mortal danger.
It perfectly illustrates the intense friction between rigid maritime bureaucracy and the fluid, completely unpredictable reality of virology.
They just don't mix well.
The company's defense is entirely logical from a legal standpoint. You cannot realistically implement a total ship-wide lockdown and quarantine 150 people every single time an elderly passenger passes away from what appears to be a heart attack or pneumonia.
Because people do pass away on these trips naturally.
If you lock down every time, the entire expedition travel industry would cease to function. They followed the rules. But the tragic reality is that the rules were not designed for the Andes virus.
Because the virus doesn't care about maritime reporting standards.
Exactly. The manual does not account for a virus that has an incubation period of up to 6 weeks.
Wait, 6 weeks?
Think about the biology of that. You can have absolutely zero symptomatic people on board when the captain makes that announcement that the ship is safe.
Everyone looks completely fine.
The doctor can look around and see completely healthy people, but the virus is already quietly incubating, multiplying in the lung tissues of a dozen passengers. Following the rules perfectly didn't prevent the tragedy, because the protocol assumes immediate, visible cause and effect, which simply doesn't exist with a virus that hides for a month.
It is a profound failure of imagination at an institutional level. We build these incredible luxury vessels, we map out these exotic bucket list itineraries to the ends of the earth, but we remain entirely at the mercy of microscopic forces.
We really do.
We just traced an incredible, harrowing journey today. What started as a false alarm in the remote South Atlantic, a captain looking at the data he had and assuring everyone that a tragic death was just natural causes, evolved into a multi-continent health scramble.
It escalated so quickly.
We've got a lethal, mutating pathogen, the Andes virus, humbling a massive luxury expedition. It has forced emergency medical evacuations, left bodies in the ship's morgue, and sent international health officials across Europe and Africa on a desperate, terrifying hunt for 40 passengers who walked right off the ship and into the global transit system.
It is a stark reminder of the fragile, invisible bubble we step into whenever we travel.
You really have to give up a lot of control.
We surrender so much of our personal control. You trust the ship's water purification system, you trust the navigational software, and you implicitly, completely trust the medical judgment of the authorities on board.
Because what other choice do you have?
When that trust is misplaced, even if it is misplaced innocently due to cognitive bias in rare circumstances, the consequences are immediate, severe, and potentially global.
You really have to think about the vulnerabilities you just accept as a normal part of seeing the world. You hand over your boarding pass, you walk up the gangway, and you put your life, quite literally, in the hands of the bureaucratic systems and the designated authorities tasked with keeping you safe.
It's a huge leap of faith every time you travel.
It is. But as we wrap up our analysis today, there is a lingering thought I want you to sit with. Think about the era we live in right now.
It's an era of hyper-connected, constant, rapid global travel.
Exactly, where a pathogen can move from a remote island to a major European city in under 24 hours. So if the official authorities, the people with the maritime titles and the crisp white uniforms, look you in the eye and tell you an environment is perfectly safe, but your own internal intuition, that little voice in your gut, tells you something is deeply wrong, how much personal responsibility should you bear for stepping out of the crowd, ignoring the soothing assurances, and imposing your own quarantine?
It is the ultimate question of survival instincts versus social compliance. At what point does being polite become deadly?
That is the exact question. Something for you to mull over the next time you hear a captain make an unexpected announcement over the loudspeaker. Thanks for joining us, everyone.